The announcer's voice cracked through the smoke-drenched air, echoing across the Colosseum in a dozen languages, each more guttural or high-pitched than the last. On the screens above, flickering between signal bursts and stat overlays, bold letters scrolled. The legend ends today. Underneath, in smaller print, sponsored by Grand Lacs Nutripaste, for victories that digest slowly. In the center of the arena, where sand met blood in long-settled compromise, a lava-filled chasm opened with theatrical glee. Fire belched upward, vaporizing the bones left from the morning's event. A hush fell over the crowd, not out of reverence, but anticipation. There was always something sacred about the start of a deathmatch, even if you'd seen 4 before lunch. From the noble's box, a feathered Yar aristocrat adjusted his scent mask and turned to his gelatinous companion. "Do you think she'll scream?" "I think," burbled the blob creature while absorbing a fluted glass of champagne directly into its cortex. "She won't even blink." That's the sort of thing humans do. Very dry creatures. No flourish. Across the Colosseum, aliens packed into tiered seats oozed, clicked, preened, or simply vibrated with excitement. Their multicolored flags waved like seizures made visible. 37 systems tuned in via Neuralink, cranial port, or psychic tether. A championship match was always worth the subscription fee, and this one promised spectacle. The last known living fragment of the Baba Yaga myth versus the Empire's genetically perfected apex predator. "This is the one they finally finish her off, right?" muttered a small, furry creature gnawing a clawful of sugar frogs. "Please," snorted his larger neighbor, whose third eye blinked independently. No one survived Cryazat. Not even Cryazat's sparring partners. He ate his last one, and the Empire gave him a medal. Cryazat of bone had been grown, sharpened, and tempered for this exact purpose. A being of 4 arms, 3 minds, and no mercy. A biotechnical marvel, celebrated across war fronts, and dissected in academic circles. To send him against a human wasn't so much cruelty as ceremony. And yet there she was. The camera panned, then zoomed, forcing a dramatic recalibration of every expectation in the arena. A slim figure stood alone beneath the obsidian archway. No armor, no pulse rifle, no genetically augmented symbiotes clinging to her spine. Just a woman in a black tunic, boots dusty from walking, and a silver thermos in one hand. She was sipping from it. Is that tea?" gasped one commentator in disbelief. "She's drinking tea," confirmed another, who'd already begun hyperventilating with glee. "You heard it here first, folks. Baba Yaga prepares for her own execution with loose leaf calm." Bets shifted violently. Bookmakers screamed at drones to update odds in real time. The spread went from 99.9997% in Cryazat's favor to 99.9981%. The drop was significant. Statistically speaking, it was a spiritual earthquake. In the waiting chamber, Florence Volnova let the heat from her tea soak through the thermos into her fingers. Her breath rose in the cold air, fogging gently. She didn't look at the holoscreens or the flickering messages declaring this match an honor duel sanctioned by the Galactic Combat Tribunal. She didn't even glance at the crowd. She listened. The arena had a rhythm. Even beneath the industrial growl and alien shrieks, she could hear the systems humming, the magnetic levitators, the oxygen recyclers, the buzz of protective shielding around the audience that wouldn't extend to her. A lovely touch. Her opponent was announced with volcanic bravado. Cryazat thundered forward from the opposite gate, forearms raised, exoskeleton gleaming with gold-etched victories. A fanfare blared in multiple keys. He screamed something in a frequency meant to intimidate large mammals, and half the front row flinched. Florence blinked once, then sipped again. She could feel the way their eyes roved over her. The aliens didn't just expect defeat. They expected humiliation. They wanted it. The myth of Baba Yaga had annoyed them for decades. Too many vanishing ships, too many accidents, too many whispers from soldiers who swore they'd seen her eyes right before everything went wrong. And now here she stood, unarmored and unimpressed. A stout insectoid broadcaster, vibrating with anticipation, began listing Florence's official combat record. Please note, dear viewers, that despite her apparent frailty, This human operative, codenamed Baba Yaga, has survived 6 sanctioned executions, 29 unprovoked assassinations, and 1 wedding on Zarn Delta. There was a pause. Wait, who added that last one? The announcer buzzed nervously. No idea, replied their co-host. But I hear she killed the groom. Florence smiled to herself, just a little. She hadn't killed him. He'd poisoned himself trying to impress her. A shame. Good dancer. The announcer's voice ramped into its final crescendo. And now, with dignity, glory, and just a splash of bureaucratic vengeance, we present the final bout. Silence rippled across the arena. A ceremonial gong tolled from somewhere unseen. Time to play the part. Florence stepped forward. Her boots crunched against the shattered bone dust beneath the sand. She walked with the confidence of a librarian headed to alphabetize a battlefield. No drama, no flourish, just inevitability. Across from her, Kryazat beat his chests, both of them, and charged. The crowd erupted. Drones swooped in close for the kill shot. Florence didn't flinch. Not yet. Not until she stopped mid-step. The announcers hiccuped in their breathless commentary. The entire crowd seemed to lean forward. Kryazat froze 20 meters away, already in mid-snarl. She tilted her head slightly, like someone listening to a child explain why gravity was optional. Then she spoke. Her voice didn't boom. It didn't echo. It cut. This was your first mistake. The words carried. The translator drones stuttered but caught up. The audience reacted in confused murmurs. Kryazat snarled something about blood honor and bone feasting. Florence took another sip. Second mistake, she murmured. And then the arena lights cut out. Just for a breath. Half a second. Most wouldn't even register it. But when they blinked back on, Florence was gone. The feed exploded in static. Hollow ads flickered. The Empire's security systems began rerouting. And in the control room, 30 levels below, one engineer screamed as every display turned to a single phrase in red. She's in the system. Back in the noble's box, the Yar aristocrat leaned in, antennae twitching. What just happened? The gelatinous creature made a faint whimpering sound. She's real. Kryazat spun, all 4 eyes scanning wildly. Florence wasn't there. Not ahead. Not behind. The crowd went silent. Then the arena shook with a sound no one expected. Nothing. No kill. No scream. No clash of champions. Just absence. And then a single spotlight illuminated center field. There stood Florence. She set down her tea thermos on the ground, carefully. Kryazat charged again, roaring louder than before. Florence didn't move. The spotlight dimmed. A stillness washed over the arena, like breath held too long. Florence raised one hand, just a twitch. A burst of electricity flared across the sky as Kryazat struck an invisible barrier and crumpled mid-lunge. His exosuit sparked. His augmented lungs wheezed. The crowd gasped. Florence looked straight into the camera lens and smiled. Not wide, not cruel, but tired. Like a woman who had been hunted for 20 years and finally found a reason to yawn. She whispered, third mistake. And the section ended not with applause, but silence. The kind of silence that precedes storms. Florence Volnova adjusted her grip on the thermos as she stepped into the preparation chamber, cold, overlit, and tiled in the standard imperial shade of despair. Her footsteps echoed a little too long, a delay engineered for intimidation. Every inch of the space was designed to make warriors feel small. She didn't notice. Or, if she did, she simply didn't care. A cluster of alien technicians scurried around her, bristling with scanners, tubes, and ceremonial threats. One, a lanky amphibian with hands like damp ivy, approached with a needle. Florence raised an eyebrow. Sterility check, it croaked. I'm not planning on breeding mid-match, she said dryly. You can skip it. The technician hesitated. Her voice didn't shout, didn't plead. It just didn't ask for permission. The kind of voice you followed if you wanted to keep breathing. He turned away, muttering something about non-compliance codes. Florence rolled her eyes. Bureaucracy was their first language. She spoke silence better. Overhead, screens cycled through endless propaganda. Cryazat pulverizing opponents, pulverizing their weapons, pulverizing the very concept of resistance. His record was a monument to overkill. Each victory narrated with breathless reverence. Each death annotated like a legal precedent. Florence sipped her tea. "Ms. Volnova," a new voice said from the side corridor. It came from a diplomat, technically human, but with the posture of a creature that had long ago traded courage for clearance. He was clad in gold-trimmed robes 2 centuries out of style, and sweat beaded visibly on his scalp despite the chill. "Coordinator Wiles," he introduced himself, forcing a grin. "I'm here as Earth's legal observer. No pressure, of course. Just observing. Supporting." Symbolically. Florence glanced at him. "They send you, or did you lose a bet?" Wiles laughed nervously. "Both, actually." He clutched a tablet against his chest like a talisman. "You understand, the optics of this are significant. The Empire broadcast your opponent's arrival to 17 systems before they even mentioned you were human. They've turned this into an execution ceremony." "It's not the first time," Florence said. "But this time it's different," he insisted. "This time they're watching. Really watching. You're a symbol now. There are humans on colonies where they still think you're just a bedtime story. The kind told with a flashlight and a loaded weapon." "That's because I prefer it that way," she replied. "Why did you agree to this?" he asked, his voice quieter. "You could have refused. Vanished. Again." Florence's expression didn't change. "Because they stopped asking nicely." Wiles didn't have a response to that. He nodded stiffly and retreated toward the observer's booth, already regretting every decision that had led him here. Florence watched him go with something like pity, then turned back toward the inner doors. A low chime signaled final prep. The final corridor was a long one, deliberately long, designed to build tension in competitors and hunger in audiences. Florence walked slowly, not out of nerves, but calculation. She liked knowing exactly how many steps it took to die, publicly. As she emerged, the arena howled to life. The crowd was denser now, louder, a galaxy's worth of spectacle chasers and hate watchers. Betting drones zipped overhead, projecting odds that still favored Cryazat by an insulting margin. Her own stats hovered on a side panel like an afterthought. Species, human. Age, unconfirmed. Confirmed kills, classified. Combat role, irregular. Psych profile, unavailable. Florence snorted at that last part. Unavailable was such a polite term for "please stop reading. This folder causes migraines." Across the arena, Cries of Bone stood flanked by ceremonial guards whose sole function was to flee when he got bored. His body gleamed with fresh modifications, neural bracing rods, subdermal armor, ocular arrays that pulsed like dying suns. He towered even among his own species, a colossus in motion. His arms flexed independently, each one tattooed with the names of the worlds he'd conquered. Most had since been renamed to numbers. He roared, and the arena roared back. A ritual call and response. Florence simply waited. One of the announcers, floating in a clear anti-grav booth above the battlefield, squealed with theatrical delight. "Ah, and here she is, the so-called Baba Yaga, terror of bedtime, specter of subspace sabotage. Doesn't she look just positively ordinary?" The other chimed in. "Underwhelming, isn't she? Still, viewers, we remind you, humans can surprise you, usually by dying faster than expected." Florence ignored the commentary. Her focus was elsewhere, on the arena itself. Subtle changes since the last championship. The gravity field was marginally heavier. That would slow her, not him. The magnetic resonance zone had been lowered, making projectile interference more likely. Again, favoring him. And worst of all, they'd reduced the floor space by 11%. She would have to kill him quickly. Long fights were his strength. His endurance had outlasted entire species. A software hummed in the stone beneath her. Spectator shielding active now. That meant the match start was imminent. Florence cracked her neck. The thermos was gone now, left behind in the prep chamber. She allowed herself a final exhale. The announcer's voice rose again, this time infused with official command. On behalf of the High Galactic Tribunal of Regulated Combat, we now begin the sanctioned resolution match between Florence Volnova of Earth and Cryo of Bone, the Empire's champion. The lights dimmed to a moody crimson. In the stands, the audience shifted to record mode, devices and drones sprouting from every angle. Cryozat took the first step forward, cracking the earth beneath his feet. His roar sent dust spiraling upward, and his forearms extended in simultaneous threat gestures. One for intimidation, two for balance, and one, curiously, to wave at a camera drone. Florence didn't move. He circled slowly, testing her, watching her breath rate, posture, retinal response. She gave him nothing. He spoke then, in a low rumble transmitted through translator drones. "You're the myth. The witch who eats soldiers." She finally tilted her head. "And you're the poster child for overconfidence. I will wear your bones as a crown. You'll have to find them first." He lunged. The impact of his first blow sent a shockwave through the arena wall, cracking the outer shell. The audience shrieked in delight. Drones circled like carrion, desperate for first blood. But Florence had already shifted. She rolled sideways, slid under his third arm, and drove the heel of her boot into the joint of his lower left leg. Not enough to break it, but enough to make him think about it. He adjusted too slowly. She was already behind him. The second attack came faster. He pivoted with a sweeping arc meant to crush everything within 10 meters. Florence ducked, palm bracing the ground, and slid backward under the force. Her heart rate spiked. She let it. She wasn't trying to win. Not yet. She was reading him. Muscle velocity, reactive threshold, target prioritization. He favored brute efficiency, but overcorrected when surprised. And he never blocked. Why would he? No one had ever made him. That would be his mistake. She darted in close. For 1 second, too close. He seized the opening and launched his inner blade, something between a talon and a surgical saw. Florence deflected it with a snap wrist parry and jammed a thin transmitter chip into the side of his augment port. It didn't detonate. It just sank in. He didn't notice. She dropped back 10 meters and reset her stance. The audience cheered for the evasive human. Their tone was still amusement, but now it had a hint of doubt. Cryozat scowled. "You won't escape this time." "I'm not trying to," she said. The lights above flickered. A signal burst, small, timed perfectly to a heartbeat. Inside Cryozat's skull, his neural link shuddered. For 0.7 seconds, every command he gave his left arms rerouted into diagnostic loops. Not long. Just enough. He stumbled. The audience gasped. And Florence smiled, very slightly. She was still reading him. Still timing. The real strike would come later. But for now, she had everything she needed. The myth had entered the arena, and the myth was alive. And now the myth was watching you bleed. The third strike should have ended her. It came down like a planetary collision, 4 arms, each moving at different velocities, with bone-crushing trajectories calculated by an onboard processor humming with centuries of kill data. Cryozat's exosuit surged forward, amplifying his motion with a shriek of grinding servos. The air itself screamed. Spectators leaned in. Even the announcers, so prone to hyperbole, fell briefly silent. Florence stepped aside. Not leaped, not rolled. Just a pivot, one foot shifting with the elegance of a sigh. The blow missed by centimeters and obliterated the arena floor beside her. A geyser of debris erupted. Cryozat blinked in visible irritation. He hadn't missed in 100 years. Florence's breath hitched once, intentional. A feint of weakness. Let them see her sweat. The arena sensors adjusted her vitals upward. Drones snapped closer to capture her face. She knew the game. Cryozat came again, rotating mid-lunge, arms fanning outward like the petals of a steel blossom. This time she ran, barely, but not to escape. She traced a tight arc around him, skimming the broken floor, toes grazing the edge of the magnetized boundary field. The energy crackled at her heels. Inside her mind, calculation scrolled. Inertia, wind resistance, neural delay. She adjusted her movement with surgical precision, just enough to bait him again. His third limb extended. She let it brush her shoulder, superficial damage, precisely placed. Blood for the cameras. A red arc against the dull gray sand. The crowd roared. From the stands, it looked like she was barely holding on. They loved that. The illusion of struggle. The promise of failure turned success. But this wasn't fiction. Florence didn't believe in Florence sequels. Only in timing. Above, the announcers recovered their breath. Would you look at that movement, TRRKLX? Unorthodox footwork. Human unpredictability at its finest. Primitive, but poetic Nargith. Our analysts calculate her survival time should have expired 30 seconds ago. She's rewriting the stats in real time. Or she's about to be rewritten into paste. Florence didn't hear them. She tuned out everything now, crowd, commentary, even the smell of melting synthetic armor. Her mind was a metronome. Every motion measured, every muscle filed to a single purpose. The virus chip was embedded. That was step 1. Step 2 came now. She led Cryazat toward the far corner of the arena, right beneath the signal amplifier, disguised as a decorative pyre. The air shimmered here, not visibly unless you knew what to look for, a faint hum in the grav field, a flicker in the static current. A blind spot. She turned, not to flee, but to face him full on. It looked suicidal. He saw opportunity. He charged, all 4 arms extended, his spine snapping forward like a coiled viper. The ground shook under his weight. Even the arena walls, designed to withstand ship-grade ordnance, trembled. Florence let her feet slide apart, lowering her stance. Her fingers flexed once. Now, the chip activated, triggered by proximity and a bypassed maintenance protocol she'd memorized 6 years ago. A brief signal pulsed through Cryazat's augment systems, too short to notice. A whisper in the code. But it was enough. For precisely 1.4 seconds, his third arm desynchronized from the rest of his nervous system. It struck too early. Florence ducked beneath the blow, stepped into his guard, and drove the heel of her palm into the hinge of his shoulder plate, an engineered joint, not natural bone. The plate shifted 0.5 millimeter. Just enough. She dropped low, spinning, and swept his forward foot out from under him. His weight was still in mid-transfer. The timing was flawless. Cryazat stumbled. He didn't fall. Yet. She followed through, pivoting again and planting a small disc, no bigger than a coin, at the base of his spinal interface. It adhered with a wet click. The crowd didn't notice. The announcers did. Wait, what was that? Did she touch him? Playback unclear, Nargith. Rewinding now. Slow it. Frame by frame. By the stars, she did. She tapped his spine. That's not in the rules. Nothing in the rules says she can't. Cryazat recovered fast. Too fast. He turned, eyes wild now, and slashed downward with all 4 blades, creating a cyclone of death that even Florence couldn't fully avoid. She was clipped, thrown off balance. Rolled once. Landed hard. The crowd screamed in collective joy and horror. Dust rose. Silence followed. And from it, Florence stood. Blood on her lip. One arm hanging limp. But standing. Cryazat snarled, truly enraged now. You can't keep running, human. I'm not running, she said. And then she smiled. The disc on his spine activated. There was no explosion. No visible effect. But Cryazat's eyes widened. His knees locked. His limbs moved. But not where he told them to. He raised one arm and stabbed himself with the other. The crowd went silent. The announcers stopped mid-sentence. In the noble's box, someone dropped a glass. Cryazat screamed, not in pain, but confusion. Betrayal. His own body had turned on him. Florence walked forward slowly, each step deliberate. The neural interference would last 12 seconds. No more. It had taken years to design, and she'd never tested it live. She wouldn't need to again. Cryazat swung wildly, trying to stabilize, but his legs no longer answered in sequence. His own balance betrayed him. She waited. At second 10, she struck. A single punch. Not flashy, not lethal on its own, but it landed directly beneath his third sternum, right where the redundant processor sat. The impact caused a cascading loop. his fail-safes engaged and overcompensated. Kryazat's body locked up, then twitched, then fell. Hard. The floor cracked. The dust cleared. He didn't rise. For a moment, the universe paused. Cameras froze. Fans held their breath. And then nothing. Not a sound. Just Florence. She stood above the fallen titan, eyes unreadable. The blood on her face was already drying. The announcers whispered, "Is he dead?" Vitals declining. Augments failing. Neural link terminated. She won. By all that floats, she won. A heartbeat later, the crowd erupted. Not with joy, confusion, awe, panic. They didn't know how to react. The myth had become truth, and truth was inconvenient. Florence turned from Kryazat's body. Drones hovered near her face. She looked into the lens, calm. "I told you," she said quietly. And then she walked away. She left the arena like it was just another corridor. No celebration. No bows. The crowd parted, stunned. In the control room, someone asked if they should activate the next challenger. A general answered, "Do you want to be the next challenger?" No one replied. Florence walked past the gates, unchallenged, untouched now, a ghost again. The anatomy of the kill wasn't in the weapon. It was in the weight. A single body lay in the center of the arena, all four arms twisted inward like a beetle appended, twitching softly in defeat. Kryazat of Bone, the champion of the empire, devourer of insurgents, breaker of resistance, was dead. Or, to be more exact, systemically collapsed. Brain overrun. Spine shattered internally by what analysts would later call a minor pulse feedback anomaly. But everyone watching knew the truth. He was killed by a human. And not just any human. The Baba Yaga. For 12 full seconds after Florence Volnova vanished behind the exit gate, no one in the stadium moved. Somewhere a child cried. Somewhere else, a diplomat cursed. In the upper tiers, the noble triumvirate of Garuzhin began eating their own tongues in frustration, a traditional display of political embarrassment. It would take hours for the cleaning staff to remove the ceremonial blood. In the control booth above the arena, the High Overseer of Combat, a bloated reptilian with 3 eyes and a dozen degrees in ceremonial violence, simply turned off his console and muttered, "I'm retiring." Florence, meanwhile, walked through the auxiliary corridor with the same relaxed gait she might use in a city park. Blood stained one sleeve. A rib ached, fractured but clean. Her left hand trembled slightly from the delayed crash of adrenaline. So she tucked it in her coat pocket and focused on her breathing. She didn't need to win for a crowd. She needed to survive by margins measured in millimeters and microseconds. The rest, drama, spectacle, applause, was a burden for lesser fighters and politicians to carry. A side door opened as she passed, revealing Coordinator Wiles, Earth's diplomatic representative and bureaucratic equivalent of a wet sponge. He stared at her like she was a myth made flesh. You really did it." "I told you I would," Florence said calmly. "You killed the Empire's champion, in front of 12 billion viewers." Florence paused, then gave a half-shrug. "Good camera angle helps." "No, you don't understand. There's fallout. Galactic laws. Alliance frameworks. Do you even know how many treaties this violates?" "Only the bad ones," she replied, brushing a splinter of bone from her sleeve. Wiles paled. "We were supposed to lose. That's what they said. That's what Earth signed on for. The match was meant to be a message about humility, cooperation. You were supposed to demonstrate bravery, not..." He gestured vaguely toward the distant roar of panic. "Killing him was brave," Florence said. "They'll call it terrorism." "They always do." The sound of alarms began to echo faintly from the upper levels. Fire systems overwhelmed by civilian exodus. Panic was spreading like pollen. It wasn't just a death in the arena. It was the shattering of narrative control. The myth they'd crafted of human limitation, of galactic hierarchy, of invincibility stitched into the bones of the Empire, had cracked, and through that fracture, fear was blooming. Wiles glanced over his shoulder, then lowered his voice. "The Empire just declared a diplomatic emergency. They're calling for an immediate sanctions review against Earth. They're using terms like retaliatory embargo and precision discouragement. Sounds like foreplay, Florence muttered. Baba Yaga, he said, voice catching. Florence, what do I do? You evacuate the non-combatants. The scientists, the kids. Everyone who thought peace was real. Is war coming? Florence looked up at the glowing ceiling. Somewhere above them, a dozen planetary dignitaries were arguing over the word proportionate. Somewhere else, starships were powering weapons they swore were ornamental. No, she said. War isn't coming. War already came. They just didn't notice until I made it bleed. Wiles swallowed hard and started walking in the opposite direction, pulling out a comm unit already buzzing with demands from Earth's embassy. Florence moved on. Each step was slower now, not from fatigue, but purpose. The next act wasn't in the arena. It was in the shadows, behind the curtain, where decisions were made and blood was categorized as unfortunate collateral. When she reached the docking bay, the guards were already gone, emptied by orders or fear. Her ship sat waiting, half covered in soot from earlier skirmishes. An ugly vessel, built for stealth, not pride. She liked it that way. The uglier something looked, the fewer people tried to steal it. The boarding ramp hissed open. As she stepped inside, the onboard AI, Velis, greeted her with its usual sardonic lilt. You're early. Did the bone beast disappoint? He tried, Florence said, setting her thermos down beside the navigation console. I'm detecting 13 communiques from planetary security, requesting your immediate arrest. Standard. Also a death bounty. Who's the sponsor? Joint Imperial High Command. 12 figures. Convertible to 6 currencies. Florence wiped the blood from her face using a dry cloth tucked into her sleeve. That's flattering. Should I initiate stealth mode? Yes. But make it look like we didn't. Already done. May I suggest rerouting through the Adrazi Drift? Less patrol density. More chaos. Sounds familiar. As the ship lifted, Florence settled into the cockpit. She looked out the viewport at the crumbling elegance of the imperial capital, its towers glittering like teeth in a skull. Broadcast something, she said. To whom? Everyone. Velis paused. What message? She smiled faintly. No message. Just the footage. The AI understood. The raw fight. Unedited. No commentary. Just her, bleeding and breathing and breaking the unbreakable. Truth like a blade. Done. In the communications core of the Galactic Senate, signals began pinging. Untraceable. Unauthorized. Uncensored. The match as it actually happened. By the time anyone could filter it, the video had been seen by over 1 billion beings. On colony moons, children chanted her name. In war rooms, analysts screamed at broken predictions. Mercenaries doubled their rates. The galaxy, once aligned under unspoken power structures, was fracturing. And Earth? Earth said nothing. Not officially. But across its outer colonies, conscription requests quietly disappeared. Transport routes reprioritized survival over diplomacy. On one snowy outpost in the belt, a veteran sat back in his chair, sipping coffee, and whispered, "She's still got it." Back in her ship, Florence closed her eyes for a moment. Let the engine hum lull her. Then the comms lit up again. Incoming transmission. Encrypted. Old signal. One she hadn't heard in years. She tapped it open. Audio only. A man's voice. Rough. Familiar. You're not finished, are you? No, she said, staring at the stars sliding past her viewport. This was just foreplay. They're calling for negotiations. Want to send a new envoy. They want someone they think they can manage. A pause. Then they're asking for you. She smirked. Of course they are. What should I tell them? Tell them I'll come, she said. But only if they send tea. The voice on the line chuckled. Same as ever. The call ended. Her smile faded. Not sadness. Not fear. Just weight. History had long since pressed itself into her bones, and it was getting heavier by the year. But she'd carry it. She always had. Somewhere, she knew, the Senate was meeting in emergency session. Somewhere 100 species debated whether humans were liabilities or legends. The ones who saw the difference were already preparing to run. Let them. Florence reached for her thermos. It was still warm. Outside, stars flared and vanished as her ship slipped into dark space. 1,000 worlds held their breath. The galaxy had sent their best. They hadn't come back. And now it would learn that even silence could kill.